Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for being with us this morning. You've had a lot of experience under the Bloomberg administration as well, and working with people like Amanda Burden and Jeanette Sadiq Khan. You're the expert. Can you tell us what makes places great? What differentiates spaces that are good, great, and amazing?
Well, that's a very easy question to answer. It's people. People make places great. So we very often focus on the wrong things when we're urban designers and think that if we simply get the container correct, we will succeed, but it's not. First you have to have the life, then you have to have the space, and then you have to have the buildings. That's Jan Gehl's sayings. So people like to see other people, and as you design spaces, you have to design them from the point of view of those who will use them. And then when they are used, that'll attract people to come see those people, and those people will attract other people to come see them. And the next thing you know, you finally have a space that is vibrant, that's alive, that can be considered a great public space. And what takes that to the next level, and what lets you get to that initial level quicker, is great design. If you set a standard of design, you will communicate to people that you care about them and their surroundings, because everything has to be perfect. Let's say if you're shopping for a new cell phone and it's clumsy, or the thumb button is in the wrong place, you'd throw it away. Well, similarly, what if you're in a public space and the bench is too low, or it's too narrow, or there's not enough room for two people to pass? You're going to say, my God, this is not designed right. This doesn't feel right. And those small clues will make you question the bigger picture. What is the city doing? What do they know how to do things right? Do they care about people in their space? So urban design, even though it operates at the largest scale, has to concern itself with details.
And that differentiates. And that differentiates great from amazing.
I would say in my book, you have to get the details right just to get to good. And then to move your way up, now you're in a world-class competition. And to get to amazing, not only do you have to be great, but you have to be surprising.
Any examples?
The High Line.
Yeah.
I can't think of any better example where you wouldn't expect this. You don't immediately imagine that you can walk through a modern skyscraper city at that level through a park. And the juxtaposition of all these emotions, these senses, brings your experience to a new level. I'll tell you, there's a project I'm working on right now in New York that will try to achieve something similar. It's called the Halo. It's actually an amusement ride, but it's a tower. It's a very, very beautifully designed tower to go over Penn Station. And it's 1,200 feet tall. You're taken very slowly up to the top and then dropped. Of course, a very safe contraption, but you're weightless for 6 seconds as you come down. And just imagine how you then perceive the city around you, the skyscraper city, as you have that experience. So for me, it's indicative of the need for surprise, for experience in a new way.
Why was the Urban Design Division in New York City set up only in 2007? What was it like before that, and what's the importance of design in city planning?
So before 2007, urban design was subsumed into something called ZUD, Zoning and Urban Design. And that was a consolidation that had happened over many years, from the point in the early 1970s when there was an urban design group, especially made by Mayor Lindsay, to help the city recover from some of the difficulties that all American cities were facing in the 60s, to focus on design actually as a way of communicating with people. That was a wonderful experiment that took place in that era. And in fact, a lot of people attribute Mayor Lindsay's creation of this urban design group to a guy called Paley, who was Amanda Burden's stepfather and the head of the CBS network back then. Fast forward a generation, Amanda Burden is chair of city planning. She is desperate to raise the level of design in public space in New York City, in public works, in zoning, and she comes up with the idea that the department needs design eyes, a group within city planning of people who draw and see and touch and measure and are able to communicate both with the community but also with the city planners. So the Urban Design Division was recreated by Amanda Burden, and she chose me, I'm very honored, to be its chief urban designer and to build the group.
Is this the same Mr. Paley after whom Paley Park is named?
It's indeed the very same Paley.
Ah, okay.
And in fact, I use that as an example of the durability of urban design. What Amanda saw during the construction of Paley Park, my daughters now are transfixed, mesmerized, going in there. We have take a busy, crowded day in Midtown Manhattan. You want a break. You want an oasis. And I can take my daughters there and they'll just stare at the waterfall and look up at it and be transported. That gives them a new sense of a city, a new sense of what it means to be civic. And what Amanda saw, my daughters now see, and I hope they carry forward too.
Speaking of Amanda Burden, she's spoken about an approach to public projects where new public projects are best approached if drawn in three-dimensional scale from the perspective of a pedestrian navigating the city. Could you elaborate more about this 3D approach?
Everything is different depending on how you look at it. And for too long we've been looking at the city through the windshield. I think now if you look through the lens of a person, eye level, sidewalk, you reorder the elements of the city around that perspective. Yesterday in my lecture I talked quite a bit about the technique of doing that, of treating the sidewalk as a room, of looking at designing a floor, the walls, the ceiling, just like an architect would design an incredible house, space, and building. You need to do the same for public space. Every detail matters, and there are components everywhere that you can maneuver and manipulate and change. And how you compose all these things, the sidewalk paving, the facade articulation, the lighting, the benches, the planting, the curb, all these things come together to form a spatial experience. It's your responsibility to form it as well as you possibly can. And how are you judged? You're judged from the pedestrian point of view.
Which is the street you love most in New York, or that you're most proud of in this respect?
There are many great streets in New York. I mean, to walk down Fifth Avenue at sunset, seeing the crowds in front of Rockefeller Center, it's amazing. But I love my own street best, Van Brunt Street in Brooklyn. To walk down Van Brunt Street on a spring afternoon when the sun is at about a 30-degree angle coming through, your neighbors walking by, saying hello to people, tourists coming by, curious New Yorkers bicycling in to see what is Red Hook like, this neighborhood we've heard about. That street is alive. That street is the heart of our neighborhood. And it's every bit as impressive as Fifth Avenue, but in a different way.
Okay, moving on to green architecture. You're big on greening and sustainability. How do you overlap a city with nature? What are some of the struggles or obstacles you faced along the way when you were trying to green the city?
The first obstacle is one of perception. People immediately think a city is somehow in opposition to nature. Oh, have you gone to the country? Oh, are you in the city? Do you want to experience nature? How do you do it? The normal perception is you leave the city to experience nature. That is completely wrong. I was a biologist as an undergraduate. I understand that life is a continuum. We're a species amongst millions of others, but it's also a continuum of scale. That you can have nature in the city at the scale of a microbe, a flower pot, a tree pit, a park, a central park. It doesn't matter. The scale is there. What matters is connecting them. And if you can connect both your spaces and your scales with an appreciation of nature as necessary in a city, you will have a different city. And, you know, looking over here at the Oasia Hotel, for instance, and many of your buildings that have successfully now incorporated green into their structure is very impressive. I really find that about Singapore to be compelling, that nature has a place here. It's purposeful and it's successful.
Related to nature also in many ways is resilience, and especially in New York after you've experienced something like Hurricane Sandy. You wrote a book entitled The Nature of Urban Design, A New York Perspective on Resilience.
The Nature of Urban Design, A New York Perspective at Resilience. Available, I hope, at a bookstore near you. You have to talk to Mr. Bashir.
Or online at any rate, yes. What is the relationship between urban design and resilience? And how does risk planning and planning for the unpredictable square with a long-term master plan?
Well, if I told you, nobody would buy the book, so I have to keep that a secret. No, I'm joking here. Urban design is resilience. Now, this is a longer argument, and that's something it's hard to get into just a few words, but understand that urban design is a way of changing cities. And cities need to change constantly. A city never stays the same. It's either getting worse or it's getting better. Resilience is the ability to bounce back better than you were before. That's crucial. Many scientific ways of measuring resilience fail to account for that. They see resilience as being quantifiable as a function of percent recovery over unit time. In other words, 70% in 2 years, let's say, is considered resilient. But that's wrong. Whenever you have a function that doesn't go beyond 100%, and you have a repeating shock over time, shocks come, you go to zero. Cities somehow, through history, have not gone to zero. They haven't had scientists, they haven't had sensors, they haven't had technologies that we have today. And yet cities, historical cities, are still here. They are resilient at their core. Why are they resilient? What is it about a city that makes it resilient? In other words, what is it about a city that makes a city come back stronger after a challenge to it? That essence of resilience is civic virtue. It's a classical concept. It is as old as ancient Athens. There's the oath of the Athenians. When a young person became a citizen of Athens, to become a citizen of Athens, to mature, you had to take an oath. And that oath had 3 parts. 1, revere the gods. 2, obey the laws. But 3, leave the city not less but greater than you found it. That necessity of leaving it better than you found it is the core of resilience. Because people believe that in every act, large or small, they are sworn to make things better. They are sworn to come back to 110%, not to accept 70% or 80 or 90, but better. And when you compound that over time, that is how you build resilience.
You mentioned civic virtue and making the city better. So does that mean that urban design is just one part of resilience? What is the relationship specifically between urban design and resilience?
Urban design is a tool of changing cities. Urban design has 3 components which are necessary anytime something major changes in a city. Those components are politics, finance, and design. Those 3 have to be brought together. Therefore, an urban designer is one who wants to achieve a change in reality. There are many great designers in New York, but there are relatively few urban designers, because to be an urban designer, you have to work under the pressures of politics and the pressures of a profit motive for finance. You don't have to be a politician or a banker, but you have to understand those, because those are forces that you need to align and bring into the service of urban design. So, urban design is a tool that changes cities. To become resilient, you have to change in response to a shock event. So urban design is a tool of achieving resilience. And when I mention civic virtue, I talk about this because every aspect of urban design needs to believe this. The financing, the politics, and the design all have to believe that they have a responsibility to make the city better, not to simply take the profit and run, not to get the votes and then be a despot. There is a responsibility for leaving the city not less but greater than it was transmitted to you. It was good for the ancient Athenians, it's good for us today.
Okay, excellent. Let's move now to a very specific project, and maybe the most famous project during your term, the High Line. Rightly celebrated for many reasons. I love it, many people love it. It's won many awards, and I think its benefits indisputable. However, there are also some who argue that it's less accessible or less appealing to certain groups, that it's resulted in major gentrification that has created some problems for surrounding communities. What do you see as the main strengths of this project? But also in retrospect, is there anything that you would have done or New York could have done differently with it?
I think the question of gentrification is an important one. I don't think that it applies specifically to the High Line as much as it does to other projects. The High Line, remember, was conceived and built in a manufacturing district. It was not a place of large residential habitation before. So when we talk about gentrification, we are talking about displacing people who have lived in a neighborhood for a long time. That happens in many cases in New York, and that's something that must be fought. If you look at gentrification from the point of view of someone who has been in a neighborhood for a long time, put yourself in their position. If you own your property and gentrification comes, you have the choice. You can sell your property, enjoy economic benefits, and move, hopefully to enjoy your economic upside somewhere else, or you can forego the economic upside, stay in the neighborhood, and enjoy the social or physical contextual upside. You have the choice. So I don't think when someone has an equity ownership, gentrification is an issue. The problem comes when you have a leasehold interest. And if your leasehold interest is not written correctly and sufficiently durable, which is not an easy thing to do, you do not have a choice. Because if your neighborhood gentrifies, your rent is raised. Now, the choice is a false one. Either pay higher rent to stay, which you do not have, or leave. And you neither get an economic upside, nor do you get to enjoy the fruits of the new neighborhood. That's wrong, because remember, cities are their citizens, neighborhoods are their neighbors. When you gentrify a neighborhood, you have actually hurt a neighborhood because you are removing the neighbors who made that neighborhood. We have to come up with solutions that don't displace people, or that give them a durable form of interest that lets the choice be theirs about staying or going. I hope that we can solve this problem. I hope that we can use urban design to solve this problem. But that's going to take interesting laws, the politics. That's going to take new financial instruments, the finance. And it's going to take new approaches in design to be able to combine uses, to increase density, but at the same time to improve public space. It's a very, very difficult task, perhaps the most difficult task facing cities that are growing now.
Are there any projects that look promising to you in terms of addressing this?
Well, in my own neighborhood of Red Hook, there's going to be a lot of change coming, we know this. We want that change to be on our terms. We have a very large public housing project. We are committed to growing together. And I would hope that what we design as a community in Red Hook could serve as a model for other communities, a way of equitably sharing the benefits of a changing neighborhood.
Now a couple of questions about Singapore. You're a visiting fellow with the Center for Liveable Cities, and during your ongoing fellowship, you visited Singapore's main shopping street, Orchard Road, and discussed CLC's research in this area. What are your thoughts on the challenges and opportunities at Orchard Road in terms of public space and urban design?
Orchard Road is at a crossroads. It's facing a real challenge. In New York, we talk about peak retail. I think the engine of just selling more things, more expensive things, as a way of being the engine of growth in a neighborhood is over. I think we have to rebalance our mix. I think Orchard Road was over-successful in retail, went too far. At the same time, there are many aspects of the urban design of Orchard Road that are deeply troubling. It's almost impossible to cross the street, to go from one side of Orchard Road to the other at grade. The over-reliance on passageways below ground. Yes, it's convenient for the subway, but no, it does not help the character of Orchard Road. Orchard Road needs to do two things, I believe. It needs to rebalance its mixes. It needs to find something new to attract people. I call this category urban amusements. It's what the Halo project I described in New York is. There are many other versions of that. But find ways of making people experience the city, giving them the opportunity to experience the city in a new and surprising way. That doesn't mean just more retail. The second factor of Orchard Road is the physical streetscape, the relationship between transportation for cars and transportation for people. This is out of balance. It's way out of balance. And the longer it stays out of balance, the more of a threat it becomes to the long-term growth of Orchard Road. Not just growth physically, economically, but I mean socially. Growth where people come to Orchard Road as a place with character, people of all different backgrounds, all different economic interests come to experience the place of Orchard Road, which means to experience their fellow citizens in Orchard Road. Orchard Road has to rediscover an ability to bring people together. I think it's as simple as that.
Last question is about Singapore's Western Industrial Area. So in the southwest corner of the island, we have a large swathe of land, including some offshore islands and reclaimed land, which is almost entirely industrial. And I think you've had some discussions with our colleagues about that. How can cities transform largely industrial areas into mixed-use neighborhoods with good jobs and a good quality of life? And what can Singapore learn from New York in this regard?
I'm from Brooklyn. I love our mix of industrial jobs, of schools, houses, markets, even waste transfer stations, power stations, piers, ships, warehouse, everything kind of mixed together into this really, really vibrant place. I think Tuas has the kernel of a great idea in a project that's being built there now that has a multi-level factory along with housing on top of it. This vertical stacking is a great idea. It really does. It's something I even want to bring back to Brooklyn. I think that there's an acknowledgement that different uses can live next to each other. Factories, people, schools, just like my neighborhood of Red Hook in Brooklyn. We do exactly this. So I see Tuas as a great opportunity. Yes, certain industries need to be set aside with land that nothing else happened. That's what Jurong Island is for. But overall, look at this as a resource. Wow, there are some beautiful views, beautiful spaces, an incredible now MRT connection. There is an opportunity to create a neighborhood of character there. Now this is important, I think, for industry in a very surprising way. That's because we know what industry is today, but we haven't yet created the industry of tomorrow. And it would be ironic to safeguard, to work so hard to keep the industries we have and yet miss the boat on the next wave of industries. What's going to create the next wave of industries? People are going to create the next wave of industries. If you want a place to be industrial, bring industrious people to it. Get them to love it. Get them to enjoy the cycle of imagining, creating, manufacturing, adjusting, improving, manufacturing, adjusting, improving. That loop is what makes things new. We have that in New York, for instance, with the fashion industry, where, and now in Red Hook, for instance, with the 3D printing industry and the design industry. There is going to be a new relationship between design and manufacturing that is going to determine the efficiency and scalability of industry in this century. The key ingredient is people. So when you're planning an industrial neighborhood, think as much about the people as you do about the industry itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.